Hey there, everyone, and welcome to this Vibrant Music Teacher Chat. I'm delighted to be back with you again for our weekly show where we talk about all things to do with music teaching. So, we go through some latest news and new content that's coming out. We have a special weekly topic, and today we're talking about songwriting. And we also do web reviews to look at some teacher websites and see what they could improve about their marketing and what we can learn from what they're doing as well. Even if you don't have a website, still a lot to learn there. And we do an Ask Me Anything section as well. So if you have a question about anything at all, just type question followed by your question into the chat box at any stage, and I will get back to all of those at the end. I do my very best to answer every single question that starts with the word question. If it doesn't, I might miss it, okay? So, no guarantees there. So, today is about songwriting. I'm super excited to dive into that topic. Who else is excited about songwriting? It's a great one to look at, and we're going to be going through the project that I did with my students, step by step, exactly how I did it, so you can use it in your studio. But before we get there, we're going to dive into the latest news, and I would love it if you used this quick transition second to hit the like button on this video so that we spread it to more teachers around the world. Okay, so starting with my personal update and my personal news, I have been doing my last week of teaching this week. Or last week, I guess. So I've just wrapped up teaching for the summer, and I'm not actually doing any summer lessons this year because of various things, including the National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy, which we are exhibiting at as VMT, and that's a big commitment. So we're not doing any teaching this summer. We all need a break. I have sent out some fun practice challenges to my students to do throughout the summer, but some of them will just need a break, and that's okay with me too, because I know I need one. And I'm looking forward to having more time myself to practice over the summer too. But that last week of lessons, I know many people, it can be difficult to balance that, right? I'd love to hear from you in the chat what you do for your last week of lessons. I'll share what I did in case it's useful for you, in case you're coming up to a teaching break soon, or you just need a different kind of week where you do different kinds of things. So there are really 3 things that I did at every student's lesson last week. Number 1, I've actually been doing for the last 4 weeks or so, which was we started with the breath of 5, which is my new warm-up that I've been doing with students. It's like a mindfulness technique to focus on your breathing, very quick little warm up to do with posture and breathing. And then we do an animal inspired improv. That's what I've been doing the last 4 weeks, where basically my students just choose any animal. They get to pick, and they have asked me whether it has to be alive at the moment and whether it can be mythical or it has to be real. And of course, I allow them to pick whatever they want. So dragons are fine and very welcome. So they pick any animal, and then we improvise based on that animal. And I just pick in the moment. I'm just like, I think he wants to be in E flat minor. And then we play in E flat minor, and I make up some kind of pattern to reference the animal in whatever way. It's been a really creative and fun process for me to come up with on the fly. Definitely maybe not for people who are new, teachers who are new to improvising at all in lessons. My accompaniments are not super fancy or amazing, but you do need to be fairly comfortable with improv and accompanying and have sort of a few patterns under your fingers or a few ideas of what you might play. But it's been really fun and a really great way to bring out students' creativity. That's the past several weeks though. Specifically last week, I did 2 extra things. So first of all, I asked 2 questions to every student. I asked them, what is one thing that you did in the last year of piano, the last school year is what I mean, since September, what is one thing that you did in the last year of piano that you're really proud of? And I had answers everywhere from, there was this one piece that one student told me, a particular piece, I won't say which piece because I don't want to offend the composer, but she told me, I'm so proud of learning that because it was so annoying. And by the way, she didn't mean she didn't like the music. She did. She just meant it was really challenging. That's what she meant in her melodramatic tween way. So the piece was so annoying, and that's why she's proud she learnt it. And yeah, some finished a book, some did an exam, or you just learnt more about scales. Like some of them said, I'm really proud of learning as many scales as I did. Okay, great. I would take any answer. Whatever they think stood out, not they think stood out to them, whatever did stand out to them, that's a great thing for me to note. And then the second question I asked all of them was, what's one thing you want to do next year? So it could be a goal, or it could just be something you want to learn more about, or something you want to do more of. So that could be, some of them said, I want to learn more blues music, or it could be a specific piece, like I want to learn In the Hall of the Mountain King. They heard that at our last recital, and they wanted to learn that arrangement from Piano Pronto. I believe it's in movement 4. Anyways, piano pronto arrangement that a student played, and this student was jealous of it, so they want to learn that one. Or some of them did say, I want to prioritize my scales, If you don't make scales a demon, they don't become one. Students go for them. Some love them. Some don't, sure, but some do. Susan, our swag, as I call it, is available at what is my short link for that? I'm blanking. It's not vmt.ninja, that's the podcast link. vmt.rocks. vmt.rocks. Okay, I'm going to type that in the chat because I think that's going to be confusing. So, vmt.rocks, that's where you get all these t-shirts. I'm wearing it in honor of our masterclass later today. I think it'll be I might start wearing a VMT t-shirt for every masterclass. Who knows? Maybe just when I'm in the mood. But yeah, super fun. We have a whole range of them, all different colours and designs. Now, so those were my 2 questions. Does anyone ask anything similar at their last lessons? It's a really great process to go through. I also have more laid out goal setting processes in Google Docs and different templates that you can use inside VMT. Those are great, and I still use those regularly. But this specific occasion, I wanted to go shorter and snappier. I just felt like we needed it. Sometimes you just have a feeling, So that is what I went for. Just 2 questions. And I literally said it that way to students. I have 2 questions for you. And they really sat up and paid attention to me. Because I said it so curiously. The second thing that I did at every single lesson last week was what I called previews. And previews was where I was just playing pieces that are coming up soon in their book, so that if they heard one that they love and they're that type of student who's very self-directed and confident doing things independently, they could go home and start on it as a summer project. Even if it was a few pieces ahead, that's fine with me, and I told them that. If they're not a student like that, it still provides a great listening activity and preview for next year, just to get them excited about next year, to think about where they're going, make them that much more excited to continue with piano. Because I want them to leave my studio every year feeling like, can't wait to come back in September, gonna have another amazing year of learning, So I don't just want their parents to sign them up, I want the kids to be excited too. So, yeah, that's the other thing I would do, was these previews. Now, the key with listening things that I've often talked about and that I've found in my teaching is you have to tell them what to listen for before you start. So the thing I told them to listen for, or that I was going to ask them at the end of my playing, was I'm going to ask them a score from 0 to 10. 0 is I hate it. I literally said it like that, so no one chose 0, but they thought it was funny. I said 0, it means you hate it. I never want to learn that in my whole life, ever. And then 10 means I love that so much, I can't wait for it. Okay? So 0 to 10. And then the second question I was going to ask them was, what is a story or a scene from a movie that would go along with that piece. If it were in a film, what would be happening? Okay? And then I just played a few pieces and asked them every time for that score and the scene to go along with it. And some students will straight away come up with the most amazing view of snow-capped mountains and a lone elf hiking up the side, And some will say, dunno. If they do the dunno thing, if you're trying this and they say they can't come up with anything, because you will have some kids like that. It's not necessarily that they don't have imagination. Everyone has imagination. Maybe they haven't exercised it a lot, or maybe they're just reluctant to say because they think it's going to be wrong. But it does help them to listen either way because they know you're going to ask for that, and then you can give them some prompts. Is it happy? Is it sad? Is it mysterious? And then they pick one, and if they still can't come up with anything, you're saying, okay, well, is it the kind of mystery where we're going through a misty wood, or is it the kind of mystery where we don't know what happened to our chocolate? Give them a few suggestions and they can pick it, and maybe then they can start to describe that scene. So it's a really fun exercise to do and great for a last lesson because you're looking forward to next year, giving them the opportunity to get excited about things if they're going to have a break that they might learn over the break if they want to, if that's something you want them to do. And it's also just a great use of lesson time at a last lesson when people are a bit unfocused and there's no necessity to have that practice preparation time, right? So you have got some extra time to play with. You can play a lot of games and you can also do this. So that's what I've been doing all last week, and now I'm done. So the last happy summer email went out to families on Saturday. I sent it out on Saturday exactly after my last lesson because I wanted to make sure no Saturday students were confused by it, because it is confusing when you have lessons on a Saturday whether it belongs to the previous week or this week. So didn't want them to not show up because I sent that email. So that went out on Saturday evening, and then that's it. I'll just have a follow-up email that's already scheduled to those who haven't filled in their enrollment forms. It'll automatically pick that up with the way I've set it up this year, which is awesome. So that's already scheduled and I'm good to go until I need to create the schedule, which will happen in late July probably. And then new student stuff. So off teaching for the summer, but definitely not off the studio, as we all know. Sandra, great question. When previewing, do you have them look at the music while you preview it or have them listen blindly? That's a really good question because I forgot to say that, and I did say it to every single student because, So if they're online, for example, I would leave it on this kind of view. If you have two cameras and one's an overhead view, I wouldn't even switch it to the overhead view because I definitely don't want them to see the title. I don't want them to see the illustrations on the piece, and I don't even want them to see me playing it because they might go, oh, that looks hard, or think something about it based on the way it looks. I want them to just listen. So if they're in person, I would have them face the other way, close their eyes, cover their hands, put their hands over their eyes, whatever is appropriate in the space. But I like them for this particular exercise not to be looking. Now if it was a demo of a piece we were about to learn, I think it's great that they look as well because they're starting to pick up how they're going to play it and the technique and stuff, but this was pure listening. So that's the way that worked. In other news then, we had a new podcast episode teaching songwriting when you're not a pro. So it's specifically for those who feel like, well, I don't even know what the story is with songwriting, so how can I teach it? We had a YouTube video which has proven to be already quite popular about my new piano. Quite popular and maybe slightly controversial. So I'll leave you to watch the video, but it's about my new piano, which is a Kawai Novus NV10, which is a hybrid grand. So it is a hybrid, meaning it's electric, but it's got the full key action. If you want to hear a teacher's perspective on it, you can check out that video. It's definitely not a technical review. There are great channels out there with those, but that's better done by someone who runs a piano store, to be honest, or a technician. And so this is my perspective on why I chose it as a teaching instrument and what I like about it as a teaching instrument. So if you want to check that out, you can. That's on our YouTube channel. Just click over to the channel when you're done watching this. And then in other stuff, there was a great post I wanted to mention on Studio Rocket Web Design, which is Jana Carlson, her blog, Studio Rocket Web Design, and it is about what she calls the piano teacher sabbatical. So she explained how she's using her website to provide resources for her students while she takes a break from live one-on-one teaching or whatever live teaching she's doing. So she's doing a sort of hybrid approach, I guess. Anyway, it's an interesting one to look into if you've considered something similar, or if you need a break for something, anything, a baby, a surgery, to go to Africa, I don't know, anything. Interesting perspective on that. And then lastly, in new stuff and stuff coming up, is next week's chat, which is going to be with Shelley Davis. She's from the Piano Parent podcast. Many of you will love Shelley, and I'm really excited to chat to her again. And we're going to be looking at things she's learned from piano parents that maybe we need to know something about. So that's next week. I'm really looking forward to that. And quick warning that I have that next week. We do have a show, but the following week, someone can tell me the date of that. I'm terrible at dates. 28th? The following week, anyway, week after next, there won't be a show. Okay? So no live show the week after next. Just to give you a little heads up, that's when I'm going to be away from computer, as they say. That fun abbreviation. No, it's away from keyboard. That's what they write. AFAIK. I've never used that abbreviation, ever. But then I'm not a gamer. So, yeah, so that's next week's show. Now, right now, let's get into that songwriting goodness. Alright, so our main focus today is songwriting, and we're going to look at my songwriting teaching process through a project that I just shared inside Vibrant Music Teaching called Chatter and Tune. So first let's take a look at the resource together on the screen, and then we'll dive into the details and exactly how I used it in my studio. The project is here for members. They can find it right now at the top of the resource library. And if you're not a member and this is your first time seeing the resource library, welcome. You're very welcome inside our site, and you can become a member at any time and you'll be able to access it. But this is the Chatter and Tunes project. And it's a PDF that you can download and use with your students. And I've listed all the previous composing projects, so if you're not looking for songwriting right now, that is an option to go for. So I'll show you what the PDF looks like. You can actually type into this PDF if you use it in Adobe Reader. I'm not going to open it that way right now, although I would suggest printing it out if you can, because it is quite good for students to write on it physically. Okay, so that is what the project looks like inside Vibrant Music Teaching, but I want to tell you exactly how I used it and the step-by-step process that we go through. It is all laid out in that PDF, so if you remember, follow along with that and ask me any extra questions here too if you've already started looking through it and you're wondering about a specific area. First though, let's talk about why we would do this. Why do you think we should teach songwriting specifically versus composing? Composing in general is incredibly valuable to teach your students because it helps them learn that they can write music too. It helps them improve their music theory knowledge, and it's fun and creative. And you can also do stuff like put together a studio book or a CD as a great studio-wide project. So this is the book we put together this year. And we put together a book every single year in my studio, so I have all the past ones. I treasure them, and students have them sitting on their piano. I often see them sitting on their piano at home, so they've been perusing through them as well. This year, though, it's a bit different because there are words! I'm not going to hold it up long enough for it to focus on the words because I don't want to show you students specific names, but each piece has words. So how did that work and why did I do it that way? I decided on a songwriting project for several reasons. First of all, I wanted to give students an extra outlet for self-expression and more creativity, and I thought writing their own words would be a fun way to add an extra element to that. Then I also wanted an opportunity, and this was really the number one for me, to improve their ability to put rhythm to words. This is something that comes up on a lot of standardized tests and exams and things like that later on, and students really struggle when they get to it. I never realized quite how much they would struggle until my students started reaching these later exam grades, these theory grades that they were doing, and really having so much trouble with this specific area at grade 5 or 6 or whatever they were doing. And it was a surprise to me because it's something that I always found intuitive and easy, but students often don't. So I wanted to bring this back earlier in the process, not just for the exams, you all know I'm not about that, but so that they would improve this skill and feel confident doing this if they ever needed to, for any reason, including writing a song. And what better way to work on this skill than actually writing some songs together. Now, the other fun element that I added into this was to bring my studio together. So many of you will know that last year I did a collaborative composition project where we literally passed on a piece from student to student, where one wrote the A motif, one wrote the B motif. The third student put together those A's and B's into a simple form, A, B, A, or whatever. They choose that and they put together the left hand, and then the last student chose the title and added the dynamics. So every student did every one of those stages, and every piece had been through at least 4 students. That was super fun last year. I wanted to find a way to collaborate this year, but I didn't want to go the same format and I didn't want to pass it on quite as many times. So I decided on a songwriting project where my students would write the lyrics and then pass those along. You don't have to do it that way though. You can have a student write the lyrics and compose the music for those same words, but I think this is an extra fun element that you can add into it. So let me know in the chat if that's something you think might be fun. The way it worked was we started with those lyrics. So I got every student to write a set of lyrics. Keep in mind that we're aiming at what I would call like a method book song or like a folk song. I'm not talking about them writing a full-on pop song. Although I think this is a great springboard towards that if they ever want to go that direction. However, that wasn't what we were aiming at here. I wanted them to write a set of lyrics, and I told them to think of it kind of like a poem is absolutely fine, and to write that set of lyrics, and they could write about anything they want. Now in the project, which is in VMT, on the first page you'll find some suggestions about what they could write about. So if they get stuck, that's where they can look at something funny that happened this week, something going on in your life, different suggestions, a place or character from a book, etc., etc. So I did give them some ideas there. Now, some students will really struggle to write this and some it'll be no problem. I would say about 70 to 80% of my students, I assigned them this to do during the week. They did it and they gave it to me. Yes, some of those took 2 weeks to remember to do it, okay? So you do have to allow time. I'm not saying everyone did it instantly. My studio is not filled with perfectly behaving, always on the ball, amazing, wunderkinds. That's not what we're looking at here, and that shouldn't be your goal. But I'd say 70 to 80% of my students did do it on their own, pretty much self-directed, with parent reminders. Those other 20 to 30%, they needed a helping hand. And the reason they needed a helping hand was not because they didn't want to do it or thought it was, boring, or because they forgot necessarily, really, or didn't have the parental support. It's because really they were nervous of it. That's usually the reason, isn't it? They didn't feel confident doing it. So for those students, say they come to the second week of when this has been assigned, and this is before I started this before we wanted to really get rolling with it. Okay, so I knew I needed a bit of lead up time to get these lyrics back off everyone. So let's say you have a student who's come to their second lesson where they haven't done this assignment. That's where I would get them to write the first line or two in the lesson. And when you do that together with them and you make suggestions, and if they really can't come up with a topic, you suggest 3 and they pick one, that kind of thing. And once they've written the first 1 or 2 lines, or you've typed it out for them, or whatever way you're doing it, then they're normally pretty confident going off and finishing it on their own. Now, if they are not confident doing it, if they still seem very iffy, I would keep going a bit longer and try to get to a point where they seem happier with 3 or 4 lines. We're only aiming at like 8 lines here, right? Some were 12, 8 to 12 lines. So it's not a huge ask in terms of writing. Then the following week, hopefully they come back with those. If there are students, a couple of my students still wouldn't have done it, and this is like 4 weeks into assigning it, right? So I'm explaining this to you not because I was frustrated with my students. I'm explaining to you because I predicted this would happen, and this is exactly what happened. Maybe your students will come back the next week and everyone will have done it, but especially if you have younger students like I do, I think you need to allow this lead up time so you have that grace for yourself and for them, and you're not feeling impatient and rushing them to get the words down. So if they still hadn't written the final verse, we would do that together at the lesson. I'm never about guilt tripping anyone or saying, oh my gosh, really? You forgot again? Because normally they didn't forget. And even if they did, it's not their job to remember. Their parents should have reminded them to check tomorrow or help them check it if they're not able for that yet. So that's the process of writing the lyrics. Once they all had the lyrics written down, I had those files saved. So I typed those into the PDF and had each file under the student's name who wrote those lyrics. Then I went through in an Excel sheet. I had the list of students and I doubled up that list of students and I muddled them all up and matched them with someone else. Now I did go the extra step of making sure it was a good match. So I did spend some time on this. You don't have to. You could totally randomize it, but I did actually read the lyrics. I mostly just wanted to read the lyrics because they were fun. But I did go through all of the lyrics and read them and say, okay, that would be better for one of my younger kiddos, or that maybe we could pass that up the chain if they wrote particularly sophisticated lyrics. I wasn't trying to match based on age or anything. I do want it to be a whole mishmash throughout the studio. But at the same time, if it sounds a certain way, I might pass it up to an older student instead of giving it to a younger one. Or especially if you have a student with dyslexia or with a learning challenge where you know the words are going to be a bit of a tangle for them, maybe you don't give them the depends on the student, right? But if you know it's going to stress them out, maybe you don't give them the most wordy one. And I did have one specific student who requested no princesses, so we made sure he didn't get any princesses or anything girly back. But in general, I was not going to try and avoid that. It was just that he specifically requested. Okay, so I then labeled the file names, and I just put the student who was going to be the composer first. So I put the student who's going to be the composer, and then the person who wrote the lyrics in the file name. So let's say Alice wrote the lyrics, and Cody is going to be the composer. Well, the file name was called Alice because they were Alice's lyrics, and now I put Cody-Alice so that it's easy to find that file based on the composer's name, because that's who you're going to be looking for because you're in a lesson with the composer, the student who's going to write the music. So once we've passed those along, here's where it gets really fun. And this is the hardest step for most kids. So take your time with it. Step 2 is about putting rhythm to those words. Now what I get them to do, and this is all listed again, it's written out with instructions here, and there's space here. I left wider spaces here so that they can write the lyrics small and then write the notes above them if they want to do it that way. They can also use a rough work piece of paper, anything at all. So what I have them do is rewrite the other person's lyrics, or if they're their own, rewrite them with dashes in between all of the syllables. So they may need help with this if they're younger, but they need to separate those syllables so that they try and see them. And actually this is the number one thing that I would do differently, is I would double check them better. Because even the students who seemed really strong on that and got it, they missed a few. And it caused issues later down the track because they're saying the notes, anyway, it just causes a mess. That's all I'm going to say about that. Make sure they get all the syllables mapped out, because otherwise you have to change their rhythm later, is what I'm saying. So I get them to separate the syllables, then try and decide the meter, clap it out, experiment together, and try and decide where the bar lines go. The reason I do the bar lines first is because I've found through my students doing exam type rhythmic, putting rhythm to words, I found putting in the bar lines to be the best next step so that they get the stresses in the right place. So I get them to decide where the stronger sounds are and put in the bar lines. Now here's one of those interesting things that I don't share with most students because I feel it probably distracts them, but interesting to me is that in English we end up with an anacrusis most of the time. So you got to explain what an anacrusis or an upbeat is, because our sentences often start with like a preposition or something. So it's not elephant walked into the bar, it's an elephant or whatever. And then in other languages that doesn't always occur, so it depends on the language. Anyway, that's just the interesting tidbit for me. But I get them to put in those bar lines so that the stresses are in the right place. Now we can absolutely move them later, but it gives us a starting point. And then we start to write in the note values above the syllables. Okay? And again, if you have a younger student, you're going to want to, or a student who's not been learning that long, you're going to want to walk through all of this together, okay? Don't assign it. Don't let them do it on their own. You have to do it with them for them to maximize their learning from it and to really get to grips with the time signature. A student can understand a time signature and even do like a short exercise on that time signature where they come up with the missing note value or a whole bar of rhythm. It's a different thing to write a bar after bar for a song, and they need to make sure it all actually fits in the time signature or change their time signature, right? But unless a student is really at the stage where they should be talking about that, it's normally just a mistake when they need to change the time signature mid-song. Depends on the kid, but normally I find that's the case. So yeah, that's the next step. Once they've got the rhythm to the words, it's just a matter of going through and experimenting and coming up with the melodies. So this is the stage that most students find pretty fun. And I encourage them, if they're anywhere, say, up to late beginner level, I would get them to pick a spot. So by pick a spot, I mean pick a 5-finger position. And some of you may think that's sacrilege, but in this case, it's going to make it easier for them to read their own piece. It's going to make it make more sense. And they don't have to pick C, right? So they can pick, like some of them pick the pentatonic on the black keys. That counts too. It's not about restricting it, but it is about picking somewhere so that they don't write something that is all over the place musically and really impossible to read for them and impossible to sing. I had to keep coming back to that with my students, especially those further along who I was saying, use the full scale. But if they want to jump up an octave on every one, I'm like, no. This is not just for a piano. Our goal is that someone can actually sing this later. And they get to learn so much from that, so that was great. And then the last stage, once they've written the full melody, that will take you a couple of weeks at least, is to get them to add a left hand or counter melody, whatever you're going to do. and get it all notated. I was notating, we did this through online lessons, so I was notating this all as we went through in MuseScore. If you are doing in person, or if you want your students to write it by hand, those are both great options, to have them do it on the computer or to write it by hand, either way. But I was writing in MuseScore for simplicity in online lessons. It also means that they can watch me do it on the screen. I share my screen while we're doing it, and they can double check my work if I'm writing their thing down correctly. They can see the limitations, so where I'm saying there's not enough room in this bar for that word, they can see there's not. I can't put a note there because the time signature dictates how many beats are in a bar, right? So yeah, putting it up on screen is a great way to do it, and you could totally do that way in person as well. When I have done these projects in person, I tend to either have them write by hand or have them notate it in MuseScore on my laptop in the lesson. But that's from former years where we could do that kind of thing. So yeah, where are we up to? So they've written the left hand now. Oh yeah, on the left hand, I suggest for many students, you give them a choice. Because this is where they could, it depends, again, if they're further along, that's fine. They can go totally wild with this. But for your students who are up to late beginner level, you're going to want to give them some choices here. And that is, for me, what I like to do is say, okay, for this first line, which one of these do you want to do? And I demonstrate as with their melody that they've written. Similar motion like this, contrary motion like this, long notes in the left hand like this, or chords in the left hand like this. And I demonstrate each one just with a bar or two, and then say, get them to pick one for at least a chunk, right? For a phrase, for a line, whatever makes sense in the context of the piece. And then they pick again for the next bit. So they're picking that, and then if they pick long notes or chords, of course I'm giving them a choice in each bar or each bit. Do you like this one here? It could be this, it could be that, and I'm doing that working out for them. Because you don't want to get stuck on this stage for years. And you might. So yeah, that's how I handle that. And then from there, it's the fun stuff, which is just adding a tad, as I called it. So that is adding the tempo, the articulation, and the dynamics. And if we want to add an extra T, the title. Although many of them realize that it can't be called title, which is what it would be at this draft stage. So that is the full process. Does anyone have any questions? I wanted to give you a full overview there. Anyone have any questions on the actual songwriting process? I'll just briefly mention the next stage for us, which is totally optional. But what I do from there is I tidy up all those MuseScore scores and I get them put together. I put them together into a book. I send that off to the printers and we end up with this. And I order a copy for every student and I give it to them along with the annual newsletter for their parents. So we did drop-offs for all of those as the end of year thing. Newsletter for parent, book for kids / parents / whoever else wants to look through it, of course, and that went out to them. I also did an extra thing this year with the songs, and that is I got a singer to record them. So here's what I did. I exported, I know this is extra for all of you, so please, if you're listening to this going, oh my gosh, I did what? I've never had a student compose before, this is too much. Please ignore me. Do the songwriting bit, do one of the simpler, are they simpler? Yeah, I guess it is easier to start with a composing project. So start with one of those. They're all on that page in VMT that I showed you. And remember to just do one thing. It's just about taking one step. I wanted to share this for those, briefly, for those that are more comfortable with composing and with technology and stuff. What I did with those scores is I exported them as a MIDI file. I brought that into GarageBand. I changed it to be not the GarageBand yucky Steinway. It doesn't sound like a Steinway. I changed it to be a nicer piano plugin that I have. I exported that. I sent all the piano recordings, digital piano versions, to a singer, and she recorded the vocal line and put them together. So that is what I did to create all of them as songs. And you can actually see those. They are at colourfulkeys.ie/chatter. Is that right? Yes, it is. Colourful Keys. Let me type it into the chat for you. colourfulkeys.ie/chatter. And that is where you can find the playlist of all the songs if you're curious what my students created. Some of them are totally mad, you know, and that's great. And some of them are really quite profound, and that's great too. So I took those songs and I put them together with just an image, and we had the lyrics showing on screen. Again, that's a next level thing, so seriously, just do one thing. Just do one thing. By the way, we have a t-shirt as well that says just do one thing, if that's your favorite slogan that we have right here. Because I do believe in that. It's just about taking one next step, and I've been doing composing with my students for years now, right? So I've built up to this point. I didn't start with all of the things I just mentioned. Great to hear, Sharon. I'm so glad it was a hit. It's such a fun thing, and it's an annual tradition for us now. So we have 4 or 5 books so far, so it's been really fun. And before that I did a CD, which was a great option as well. Probably not such a good option anymore. I would suggest instead of a CD, do a SoundCloud or something these days, unless you know most of your families have a CD player, but most people don't. That's what changed in like 6-7 years. Okay, so that is the full process. Keep your questions flowing in, but I'm going to go to our web reviews so that we can take a look at a couple of websites and learn about some marketing. Alright, so here's what we're looking for in these sites. We want there to be enough text on there, a clear call to action, consistent branding, just a couple of fonts and colors, no more than that. We want it to showcase this specific teacher and show real photos of them in their studio if possible, and have a simple menu structure. So let's take a look at the first one. This is Molly Share Music Studio. I just realized I don't know if that's Scare or Share, but anyway. And it looks like maybe it's a My Music staff website. But that's neither here nor there. So, our first impressions, what do we see? Well, I see a fairly simple menu. I think it could be simplified. We'll get to that in a second. We've got a big bold logo here, which looks bright and colourful and fun, and I actually really like the style of the like 3 eighth notes, quavers for the M in Molly. I think that's really fun, and that I can see a photo of you doing colourful things straight away. Here's the thing I would suggest about this homepage, Molly. I think we could make this smaller. I really like it, but I think you would do better with this a lot smaller and centered, like maybe from where the L is up to where the C is, about that width. So that's, you know, about a third or something, so that we can have more above the fold content, meaning stuff that we see before we scroll down. Because at the moment it's taking up a lot of real estate and not really telling me about you. So that is what I would suggest first of all, and then with that extra real estate I would put a big picture of fun things in your studio. You smiling with a kid, or just a kid playing games, or just games laid out, you know. If you can't get a kid in there, that's okay, but a horizontal photo would be great, a landscape one of something like this, you know, that's the piano safari activity. That would be great. Your menu structure, like I said, I think we could trim it down a bit more. So login page is fine. Join, okay, this should be a button, not a menu item. So can you make it a big button within this system? If you can, do that, or some kind of big obvious link. And then it needs to stand out from the rest of the stuff. Tuition and policies, I would maybe just put one or the other. I don't think we need the and in there in the menu. and then about me is fine, but I prefer just about. So I'm always trying to cut down that so that I can glance at a menu and know where I'm going and what's going on. Great that you have videos on here and everything, and your VMT membership. That's awesome. Yeah, lots of nice information there. I just think you need to reorder where things are. Maybe this video can go at the top, because we need to see a bit more of the personality right away. Those would be my main recommendations, Molly. Great work on the site so far. Okay, now it's a very different looking site. So we've got a big hero image right here, full width image with the menu up above, and we got musicians in the making, creating harmony one note at a time. Okay, I think it's great that you say where you are straight away, because it's good to be clear about that so that I know I'm in the right place, right? Oh right, but you serve students worldwide, so maybe that's not as important, but I think it's fine. Okay, this all looks wonderful. Virtual learning. Love that. Oh, and I love that photo collage. That's great. Okay, here's my one thing for you, because I actually think you're showcasing your studio and what makes you different or interesting really well in most ways. I think you could make yourself a little bit more different. What is different about you? Because I can gather it from the photos, but nothing in the text tells me that you're fun and creative and play lots of games and all of that, which is clearly true. So I would just maybe see if you can work that into the text a little bit more clearly. But the big thing for me is the call to action. You haven't told me what to do, what you want me to do. I'm lost. Obviously, I'm not lost. I know how to use a website, but people are half asleep when they're looking at your site, so they're gonna think this all looks beautiful. But if you don't give them a big button telling them where to go and what to do, you're leaving it up to them. Maybe they'll click on enroll here, but I mean, probably not. Maybe they'll click through to learn about faculty, they'll remember their pizza's in the oven, and they're gone. And they close the tab, or they minimize it and never open it again. I do that sometimes. Find it months later, hidden in my Chrome. Right, so you just need a big button telling me what to do. That's all you need. Everything else looks so good. Like I said, a bit more about your specific studio in words, because it's in the images. But yeah, call to action. That's the thing you're missing. So I hope that helps. Now we'll get into the Ask Me Anything section. Alrighty, we're going to go through all the questions. I've seen a few flying in. So I'm going to start at the bottom, why not? So Susan, is there an easy to learn platform to take the handwriting composing pieces and get them notated, I assume you mean? So there are a couple of iPad programs that do this. I'm not an expert on them because I prefer to just use MuseScore, which is just a free notation software that you use on a computer. But there is one called Notate Me, and there is one called Notion. Both have a cost. They're not free. I believe they do a decent-ish job, but I can't speak from first-hand experience. Learning to use something like MuseScore or Finale's Notepad, I think it's called Notepad, someone can correct me on that, is a great option though, and it's not as hard as you think. Many people have tried like the full Sibelius or full Finale in the past and gotten really confused by it, and while they are wonderful, powerful programs, they are overkill in a lot of cases, and so a simpler software that can do less is often better because it's easier to learn. So hopefully that helps. Colin, do you find that songwriting is still a helpful activity for a student who refuses to sing in front of their teacher? Yes, absolutely. Because as I said, they're learning so much about rhythm here. So even if they only ever chant the words, that's fine. That's okay. And it's going to teach them a lot. And they're going to learn a lot that they're not learning through singing because they won't do it, through that chanting and the saying the words and the writing of the rhythm. Okay, Susan, I think I've sort of answered that question now about notation, but let me know if you have another follow-up to that. Lydia, did you include very early beginners in the songwriting project? Like a student who's only had maybe 3 months of lessons? I can do you one better, Lydia. We included someone who had 1 week. They started right when we started the project. And I was like, yeah, throw them in. You know, they can do it. And yes, it's a lot of the teacher saying this or that. So should we put a ta here or a ta two here? And then they pick one. And you know, so it's not fully composing, but it's still a great process for them to go through, and they make a lot of the choices. Lisa, so that's an interesting one, because in previous composing projects, all the songs would end up basically the same length, generally 16 bars. However, this year, since they were from words, they ended up all different lengths. So the shorter ones are 1 page, 12, 16 bars, and then the longer ones could be up to 3 pages. No one went over that because we had 12 lines maximum to write of lyrics. So if you ended up splitting them up a lot, maybe it ends up at 3 pages. Colin, what camera am I using for this live stream? So, no, your Logitech camera doesn't look this good, I'm afraid. Would that it did, right? That would be a lot cheaper. No, this is a Sony A6400. Sony A6400 with a Sigma 16mm lens. So you can write that down if you like. It's definitely an expensive option, and there are definitely midway points between this and a Logitech. And I would suggest, if you're like, you look at that price and you go like this, which is fair, it was a big investment, but I'm live streaming and doing things every week. I would suggest your phone is a better option. If you're recording videos, your phone, assuming it's relatively recent, will look way better than a Logitech webcam. So that's another option. Oh, okay, that's a question about the masterclass. Okay, for those who are watching live right now, the masterclass link is webmusicteaching.com/pop. That's only if you're watching live right now. You can sign up, and that's starting in about an hour from now. And if you sign up now, you should get the email about it going live, even if you don't get the confirmation email, because we're really close to the time. But if you sign up right now, you should still get the live, it's going live now kind of email. But yeah. Okay, I think I got all the questions. So that's fantastic. Yes, I think I did. Okay. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining me. I hope to see many of you on the masterclass later if you are watching live. And if you're not, if you're catching the replay, let me know in the comments what you got from today's show and what questions you have about songwriting. I'd be very happy to follow up on them. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.